usually when I talk about horror movies, we always talk about you gotta narrow down your environment. Narrow down, close it in. This movie is a great staple, what I believe, when you write horror. You gotta close in your horror, close in the environment.
I mean, there's a lot of rooms in this movie.
But
there's only one room.
Right, there's only one right room, yeah. And especially if you like math.
Yeah, that's the horror movie.
One movie my
math
wife
kids.
loves because she's a math teacher, yeah.
Yeah, it does get you a little bit involved in kind of the mystery, trying to figure stuff out at the same time. So, yeah, join us today for Kyle and Nick on Film, where we cover 3 dimensions of terror with the Cube. And welcome back to the show. I'm one of your hosts, Kyle Goethe from GoatFilmReviews.com.
I'm Nick from the St. Paul Filmcast. Thanks for finding us. Thanks for watching. And for our loyal fans, thank you for continuing to support the show. Hey, we're on Twitter and Instagram. Reach us that way. Follow us there. We do have a Patreon. Check that out for some great options. Today we're going to go back to 1997. A lot of people like to talk about cult horror movies of 1997. They eventually go automatically to Event Horizon. I immediately automatically go to this movie.
We had a lot of 97 recently, too.
Yeah, it was a good year.
Well, yeah, let's talk Cube. When 6 strangers awaken in a cube-shaped maze-like structure with no memory of how they got there, they are each forced to reckon with a bevy of mysteries. Why are they here? What is the cube? And most importantly, who can they trust? As they discover that the maze contains traps set to kill them, they must uncover the pattern in order to escape the cube.
So I want to reference Event Horizon right away because a lot of people are like, that's Hellraiser in outer space. And we did get Hellraiser in space. Yeah, we eventually did. But,
yeah, we did.
I would say this is a heavily influenced on Hellraiser too.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, even the background.
Well, we're inside the lament configuration. We're inside the puzzle box, you know?
Yes, yes. So everybody's like, oh yeah, Hellraiser, it's very much, yeah, you've got to go see Event Horizon. Eventually we'll talk about that one too, but the Cube, I think, is very much like Hellraiser and almost like a condemnation that you're a victim, but you didn't really volunteer for it. They're almost talking about like, we were just taken.
Yeah, I saw some inspiration from the Twilight Zone episode of
5
characters in search of an exit. And then I think I was reading somewhere that the story nugget began as like 6 people wake up in hell, basically. And
for the film.
That was what the idea for the film initially started with. People wake up in hell. And Vincenzo Natali, who was the writer and co-writer and director of the film, was kind of looking at it as like that was his initial idea. Then he started to realize making hell as an independent filmmaker is going to be very tough. So let's find something that's a little bit more like enclosed space, and kind of started working out the ideas. He wanted to have a monster chasing them through the cube, but again, that became expensive. So it's kind of one of those issues
of the Monitor.
Yeah, but it's kind of an interesting idea where it's like you came up with this grand idea, and then you siphoned it down into what can I afford to do. I read somewhere there's only 1 cube that was built for the movie. I thought there was 2 because there's a couple moments where they look from one end to another.
I think what they do is that projection. Yeah. Like you put a camera, you just cut a cutout. Yeah. You look down, and then you can go up, down, everything. But it's movie magic that we all
Yeah, because while I was watching it, I started to think to myself, like, let me see how many cubes I can
4 of these things?
Yeah, I was trying to see, like, what's the minimum number of cubes they could have if they didn't use special effects. But apparently they only had 1, so...
And it's wonderful because sometimes it looks like the camera's inside the cube. Obviously, you do, like, 3... You set the camera and like, all right, there's no wall back there. But then you actually see that you do a panoramic. Yeah. So it's great setup. I mean, and then how the designs look very hellish. It looks very Kafka-esque. You know,
yeah, and especially another film that came out around that time, 13 Ghosts, which had kind of like the metal horror, you know, ghost visual, but then they also had like the weird intricate lining and just like the architecture of both the house in that film and the cube in this film, very similar.
I think Resident Evil took a little lift of the scene because this came out in 1997, and the beginning of it, of the strings, and you're like, that was a great intro because I never in 1997 like, whoa, wait a minute, now you know you really are in a horror movie because it starts off very quiet. And that delivery at the beginning tells you what kind of movie we're getting into. Yeah, and that's Julian Richings, who is a very well-known character actor, appears in a lot of horror films. He's got a very good body presence with like doesn't last very long. Right.
Yeah, when he showed up, I was like, I didn't remember him being in this movie. Oh, that's why. Okay. Yeah, it's actually got a pretty great genre casting there. If you watch Stargate, I've watched all 354 episodes of the Stargate franchise, so I'm well aware of David Hewlett, who is probably in over a third of those episodes. He plays our character Worth, who's kind of the guy who's not sure of his own worth throughout the entire film. Right. The one who's doubting himself inside the cube. He actually went to school with Vincenzo Natali, appeared in a couple of his short films, and then has continued to do well in the Hollywood system. We just saw him in Nightmare Alley, appeared in a small role. So
Right, yeah, as a Carnival Carney, right? Or,
I think he was in the lie detector test. Yeah.
Okay. But I was going to talk about 1997 and about very much almost like Event Horizon, where you think a character is going to be, and then you see his slow demonic demise, almost like Stan Neo did.
Yeah.
But then you see him really go horrific. And this feels like almost a little bit like the same. This is really weird that we had two movies almost kind of the same.
Are you talking about Quentin, the cop?
Yeah.
The cop character?
Yeah.
Because it's one of those, it's a trope. It is very much a trope. Is you put a bunch of people in a room and one of them has to go crazy.
Slowly.
We just saw it in the recent film Escape Room as well, which has a lot of elements of Cube at play. It's just maybe more flashy, colorful version of it.
It's a little more fill, yeah.
Yeah, there's a lot more like interesting environments in that film, and that one's a good one too. You should check out. But that's we always get one guy who's like this, who's going to go crazy in the room, and maybe the setup is that Vincenzo Natali knew that, and so he tried to make us think Worth was going to be the crazy one by just consistently like having him downplay his ability to survive the situation. Maybe, I don't know.
Right, and then you got the two females. I think this is, when you close the environment, close into characters, you have to have really good characters. I believe every character. I kind of believe them. It's not phenomenal acting of all.
Yeah, they're not blowing the doors off in any awards.
But they're really dancing on
but they do well.
cliches a little bit. Yeah, of course, the nerdy girls got to wear glasses.
Yeah, but I think if you were going to go full cliche, it would be a nerdy boy, because I do think that people tend to view like the nerdy person with numbers has to be a boy, especially in the 90s. They thought that, Yeah. And so like looking at it, at least we get a wider representation. We get some really clever female characters, and actually the guys are kind of dudding.
I think if you took the guys out, I think they'd
probably survive just fine.
Yeah. And then you realize that if they just stayed in the, which is a very much part of a horror movie, like, oh, we're getting close to the part of a maze. Oh, we're getting close to the end. Then you realize, dang it, we're not even close. We made it worse for ourselves.
It's turning the trope on its head a little bit and having our characters like, why are you going up the staircase? The killer's following you up there. Like, this is the same thing. Why are you leaving when you could do some thinking about how you're going to get through this?
Right.
But we even get, I like that we get the most clever person to survive this character, which is Wayne Robson as Renz. He is the person who we're like, oh, he's broken out of a bunch of prisons. He'll be all right.
Yes.
No.
No. Right, because he uses his shoe and clever.
Yeah.
You'll recognize him from the Red Green Show. He was a comedy.
Oh, okay.
Constantly getting in trouble in the Red Green Show.
I became aware of him from the Wrong Turn movies. He plays a hillbilly.
He's got the look for it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, and this is another thing I'll bring up. This is another horror movie from Canada.
Yeah.
So this is kind of our theme for the.
Recently, we've been hitting up the Canadians for some good horror films.
Right. And I remember why I like this movie is one of the rare movies that we got a demo tape, as well as the tape to put out to rent.
Oh, okay.
But they gave us a demo tape for us to watch.
That's cool, yeah.
Which is really rare for one that's probably made this film circuit area. And we got a demo reel, which is like, you're supposed to take that home. It's not for merchandise. You take that home and watch it, so when anybody asks about the movie, you can talk about the movie. And this is one of the weird ones that we actually got an independent movie that we actually got a demo reel to watch this movie before it put on the shelves.
Yeah, that is odd, because it did not have a budget. I mean, it very obviously shot in a
I
cube
should
with
have kept the demo reel.
noise.
I mean, how much money people probably want that? Yeah.
There's a whole Instagram page of guy who just collects like random things from movie premieres and stuff like that. He'd probably go for it. And all the characters are named after prisons, which I thought was interesting.
Yes. Yeah. Leavenworth.
They're all people that have been involved in like prison work, and maybe that's because they've woken up in a prison. Like I see a lot of precursor to Saw here. Where you're moving through the maze.
That's
There's
another reason
traps set in place for you. Yeah. It's a movie that I think this is maybe my second or third time having viewed it.
Okay.
And even so, like I don't want to say it's forgettable because it's not a forgettable movie, but the narrative I kind of forget about, and then when I watch it, I get back and reinvest it into it because it's a very simple narrative, but you want to solve the mystery.
Yeah, it's like I rewatched it again. I haven't seen it for over 20 years, and I get the story of like kind of forget like all these characters, but the concept stays with me. And how I was like, I know the ending, but yeah, you kind of forget the characters almost kind of a little bit washed away. If they get rid of one, is it really problematic? But yeah, but we know where we're going.
Yeah.
I think that's what we like as horror fans. We know the outcome. And just having the look of the inside where they are, I don't really care why it's built, how it's built, or where it is. You just want to know what they're going to do with it.
Yeah. And I think this is a case where I don't need the answers. There are some movies that I think give you like there's some hidden thing behind it, and we're not going to reveal what it is.
Yeah.
And those sometimes don't work for me because it's like it feels cheap. It feels like you're just trying to skirt the responsibility of storytelling. Whereas this is a movie where I think we know just enough when we're done. And that's why I'm kind of interested. I remember, I think my first interaction with this series was watching Cube 2, which was a sci-fi original.
And I think
and
3
then
is the
going
prequel,
back,
right?
3 is the prequel, Cube 0,
Yeah.
which I think it's funny because I think it's a circle. But I think the thing about it was I first became aware of Cube 2 and then went back to Cube. And I think 2 actually gives you a lot more information and it's less enjoyable. Like it's just like knowing the more.
It's like,
the
I
more
remember,
info
if I
doesn't
remember
really help.
recalling, it's just a big exposition dump, concept-wise and character-wise. Yeah.
Exactly. So this has the perfect amount of we're not going to give you the answers, but we'll give you some.
Yeah, it's because it's terrifying that this thing exists. That's what's terrifying about it. Like, we don't know why it's here, how they built it, but it's here.
Exactly.
And then you have to not use your wit, but you have to get along, and you have to know algebra and geometry to get the hell out of there. But not necessarily true, because if you just shut up and stay.
If you just stay with so maybe, is it saying that smart people?
I think it's saying is sometimes you're too smart for your own damn good.
That's fair. Okay.
Because if you apply the mathematics, if you apply the mathematics, you realize that 52% of the rooms are safe, which means it's a pretty good chance to just, stay still.
If you're hanging out in the room and you haven't died yet,
you do the math, like my wife did. She was like, well, that means 52% of the rooms are safe. So you got a better than 50 chance of being safe the entire time.
Yeah.
So it's not really all that.
So if you haven't exploded yet, stay where you are.
It's not really all that threatening. And then, if you just stayed where you are, you might figure out things because you realize it's shifting.
But that's the irony of the whole thing is that, like, we know it's shifting, we know where it's supposed to be, and it's not dramatic irony because we learn it as the film goes along, but if they stay where they are, they starve to death. So,
yeah.
It's that question of, do I die here or do I die out there? But I guess I have a better chance
or
of
if I
getting
die,
out
I'm
of
not
it.
going to be the first to go.
Yeah, so it's got a lot of captivating kind of ethical thoughts. It doesn't have as many about like the character interactions, but it does about the cube interactions, which I think is really cool.
I think the cube is more of an interesting character than any other the characters in the movie.
Yeah, and every time as I'm watching it, and this happened all the times I've watched this movie, every time I think they're about to run out of interesting ideas, interesting plot reveals and movements, something else happens. Every time I think I've figured out everything going on, it's like the film senses it and immediately changes course a little bit more.
It does.
And that's what I think is so well done is the plotting of it. The editing was done by John Sanders, who I don't know any of his other work, but I think this is a very well edited movie because it keeps things just to the point where you're about to get frustrated and then it directs you away.
Yeah, it's almost like they did the Ben Johnson thing. Let's sit down the script and cut out any waste dialogue that we don't need.
Wonder what they
It's
thought
very
of the two
lean.
characters
It's a very
of that,
lean script. It's a very lean art direction, but it's functional. And I think the most foreboding character is the cube, but it tells you that there's not really any monsters in the movie. That people are the most horrific things.
Yeah,
even though the cube is horrific.
It's that classic idea of when faced with two bad options, humans will inevitably eat themselves. Like they will inevitably destroy themselves when faced with two difficult decisions, which is stay here and die or go out in there and die.
Yeah. Robert Mitchum said in Out of the Past, if I have to die, I'm not going to be first, baby.
Is that the equivalent of like if you're being chased by a bear, just you can't be the slowest one?
Yeah, that's right, yeah. I think I'm not going to be the slowest one.
Yeah.
Right. So it's very much like we talked about it, especially if you want to do horror writing, you have to narrow down your environment. Really interesting characters. And we talked about that the people are not really the interesting characters. The character is the cube.
Mm-hmm.
We don't really know where it came from, what it started, who built it, but we learn more about it. All of a sudden it becomes bigger, then we realize it's more complex than we realized and stuff like that. So yeah, and then the dialogue is kind of exposition heavy. I mean, we can criticize that, but you need that for something in here.
But exposition in a mystery film, which is invariably does have elements of a mystery film, exposition is paramount. It is the driving force of the film. Any mystery movie is 90% exposition because we're learning things as the characters learn things. So it's hard to say that it's exposition heavy because it's kind of the point, Yeah. Maybe it's because of that we criticize a few of like the more lean character development.
Well, they can't go anywhere,
so much
right?
there.
There's no car chase you can do in this movie.
No.
So you have to do dialogue.
That was a sequel right there, a car chasing a cube. But
Car chasing a cube, right? Make a vessel, right? Yeah. So I love this concept. I think I liked it a little bit more than Event Horizon. I'm gonna bring that up because they came out at almost the same time.
See, and I've only seen Event Horizon once, and I remember being incredibly disappointed because of the hype for it. So I can't really recall like my thoughts on this versus that. I just know that I think this is a very successful execution of an interesting concept. That proves that piece.
I think it's one of those things like Brick. Is this going to be? I think if you go into knowing that it's a film festival circuit, that's where it wins.
Yeah.
But I think it's going to be this grand movie release commercialized. It's not working. I think it works if you know this is a film festival kind of a movie.
Yeah, because it doesn't have those big budget aspirations, especially because I could see watching this movie. It has franchise potential, and it did. It had the sequel and a prequel, and in fact, it has a it's got a remake that was made. Where was that made? It is another remake. Yasuhiko Shimizu made a remake of this movie in 2021.
Really?
Yeah. It's not an American release. No, it's a feature length movie, and it's actually got another remake, an American remake coming called Cubed. So like this thing has got some serious franchise potential, but the problem with it is that if it's all the cube, you can't do anything really unique with the sequel because you can't change up the environment very well because it's a cube.
Or you know, try to create more interesting human characters.
Yeah, the only thing you can do is improve the characters and maybe add something to the environment. Like I said, like having the idea of like the monster, the Minotaur, chasing them, you could add something like that changes up, but you can't change the scenery. So you've got to really captivate elsewhere.
Yeah. So it's definitely the horror movie of where I'm at.
Yeah.
I'm already the last people. But then it's on the aspect of you could be victim because it's almost like a scramble, just selective people, even though you've realized it's not really a test subject, but it's people just from all over.
Yeah,
that you could be part of this too.
And maybe that's the central character question I was hoping for them to be more significance to was why were they the ones chosen?
They don't really explain that very well.
Because it does feel like they're trying to figure that out, but in all these kinds of movies, and again, me having watched 9 Saw movies,
you need a badge for that too.
Yeah, see, give me badges, man. I earned them. But I think having watched all those movies, it's always about why us 5, why us 6, like why have we been selected to be here? And if you want to add to your characters, that's a great way to do it, is what is the connective tissue that keeps us here? They did it in the Twilight Zone episode. They've done it in every single Saw movie and every single mass kidnapping movie, is why us?
Yeah.
And I feel like they almost get to the point where they're questioning why us, and then they don't. They question it, and then it's like, there.
That's like, we pull over. But that Twilight episode has a very M. Night Shyamalan ending to it, the inspiration for this movie.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I kept thinking, are we going to get that? Because again, I remember this movie, but I don't really remember all the details. So I kept thinking, how does it end again? How does this work?
Yeah.
And I think that's where we start to get into, like, that's how the sequels kind of took it, was we're going to get a little Shyamalan-y here. But we don't need that.
But I think the whole point of the movie is kind of the ending. Are they really going to, for what they consider what needs to be assisted, the character, the person on the spectrum.
Yeah.
And they're going to help him out, or they're just going to leave him on the wayside. And I think that's the whole point of the movie, is you're going to assist all yourselves to rescue this person out.
Yeah. And being a fan of David Hewlett, I'm always, when he's on screen in the movie, I'm always watching him, because I just find him to be a very fascinating actor. And his whole character arc of, like, finding self-worth, and finding it's weird to say finding a family, because he is a loner. He's sitting at the edge of the cube every single time. He's in the far off corner. He's not really contributing. But at the end of the film, him and Levin being able to kind of understand the fact that even though he doesn't think he's going to get out, he still is not alone.
Yeah.
And I think that's kind of an interesting idea, is that even though we're not getting out of life, we're not making it out of life alive, but we can have the people around us who can make it a little bit less painful at times.
And you do get that very much like Platoon of Tom Berenger and Willem Dafoe, that character where she's hanging out. You can help me. And it's like, well, if you're gone, you're less of a problem, and I'll be very much like Platoon.
Yeah. And having been someone who just watched Platoon for the first time last
very
week,
much, if you watch Platoon and see this movie, like, yeah, that's very much
you
like
can
that.
see that. Yeah, that's
yeah. Even though we don't get along, you could probably want to help me out. No, I don't.
Yeah, it's finding self-worth, Leavenworth. There we go.
Yeah. So it's a good movie. I'm glad we went back to it. I kind of forgot about it a little bit, but it's been it's been 30 years. 35,
It's 25 now. Yeah,
25 years. I can't believe it's been that long.
Been some time there. Yeah. And if you are a fan of Vincenzo Natali and you want to have us cover more of his films or perhaps the sequel to Cube, join that Patreon down below.
Yeah.
But while you're down there, you can let us know your favorite Vincenzo Natali film. I like a lot of his movies. He did In the Tall Grass, which was an adaptation of a Stephen King, Joe Hill story. He did Splice. He recently worked on the new Stand adaptation. So he's done some really dynamically.
And I'm not saying it as an insult, but Splice was very weird.
Yeah, it is.
I'm not complaining.
Let us know your thoughts on Cube down below. Let us know your thoughts on the franchise at will, the director, any of the cast inside. We love sharing these kind of comments.
Should we go more Canadian with our horror movies, I guess?
Yeah, let's continue this deep dive, I guess, into Canada. We're so close to Canada. We might as well keep sneaking across the border to steal some movies. But yeah, let us know your thoughts down below. And while you're down there, click like and subscribe. There are 2 things that you can do that cost $0 and totally help out our channel and make sure that you never miss a new episode of our show as it drops. And as I mentioned before, that Patreon is as low as $1. It's as low as cutting out your caribou every single month and joining the Patreon so you can help us pick the different films that we can talk about. And you can also see our show Picks with Kyle and Nick. That is a monthly show that is available for patrons only. That's all the time we have there, folks. We're going to hang on the cube, but you can find my film reviews at gofilmreviews.com.
You can find my podcast, the St. Paul Filmcast, anywhere you find podcasts. And just for the record, he's acute and I'm obtuse.